Throughout history, boycotts have played a decisive role in the struggle against state oppression. The Boston Tea Party, Gandhi's Salt March, and the isolation of apartheid South Africa. Boycotts are a non-violent way to pressure a government to change its ways by drawing attention to oppressive policies through withholding cooperation. And that's exactly why the Palestinian Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement has been gaining traction worldwide, and particularly on college campuses in the US. I sat down with Omar Barghouti, one of the founders of the BDS movement, to find out how we got here and why BDS is so critical to the Palestinian quest for freedom.
Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions is a movement that was launched by the absolute majority of Palestinians in 2005. It calls for Palestinian rights under international law. At a minimum, that means ending the occupation, the military occupation of Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, ending the system of racial discrimination that exists in Israel. As I said, 60 laws discriminate against the non-Jewish, the indigenous population. Palestinians have called for isolating Israel's regime until it recognizes our rights under international law.
Why is the Israeli government trying so hard to discredit and stop BDS?
Israel perceives BDS as having a very serious strategic impact on its entire regime of oppression because Israel, and as well as we do, see the South African president as very important. We see the US civil rights movement and the power of boycotts in that movement in affecting serious change. At the academic level, the cultural level, and increasingly at the economic level, Israel's isolation is increasing around the world. They see the writing on the wall, and so do we.
Is that an observable fact? That statement that Israel's isolation is increasing all over the world?
Absolutely. Why else do you think Israel treats BDS as a strategic threat and allocates hundreds of millions of dollars to fight the movement, using its intelligence services, dictating policy to some governments that they want to punish BDS activists, threatening churches and trade unions and social movements and so on.
Pro-Israeli US lawmakers are seeking to criminally outlaw support for the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions campaign against Israel. If a proposed bipartisan law is passed, backers of BDS could face up to 20 years in prison and a whopping $1 million fine. Who's most complicit?
The United States government, obviously, the US Congress, are the most complicit. They continue providing Israel with billions and billions of dollars, weapons, protection at the United Nations, preventing any country from taking serious sanctions against Israel.
For decades, in one of the most consistent and steadfast displays of bipartisanship, Democrats and Republicans have united to guarantee Israel keeps receiving more US foreign aid than any other country in the world. Most of it to fund Israel's military, bringing the total to $38 billion over the next 10 years.
Without the US government, Israel would face serious sanctions because of its egregious violations of human rights and international law. So it's not held according to the same standard. Any other state committing equal crimes would be held accountable, but not Israel, because of international complicity.
The US claims they're the leaders of the free world. What is it about the US that specifically prevents them from living up to that reputation when it comes to the freedom of Palestinians?
I wouldn't even put the United States as one monolithic sum, because there's the 1% and there's the military-industrial complex that's ruling the United States, and then there's the majority of the people in the United States. The majority of the people have no interest in maintaining Israel's apartheid, Israel's military occupation, and Israel's violations. Recent polls by Brookings Institution, for example, have shown that about 60% of Democrats support sanctions against Israel. 46% of all Americans support sanctions against Israel. That's almost half.
This year, the New York State Senate passed comprehensive legislation to ban colleges from using state money to fund any entity that boycotts Israel, to block public funding for student groups that, quote, participate in hate speech, a term that they use for BDS, and to also ban the state from contracting with any organization known to support BDS. The Center for Constitutional Rights refers to it as the Palestine exception to free speech. Why does that exist in the States?
For many reasons, the most prominent of which is Israel's lobby influence in Congress among elected officials. But Israel can get away with a lot, passing anti-BDS legislation, suppressing free speech related to Palestine, and indeed pushing a McCarthyism of sorts. I mean, it's even worse than the first edition of McCarthyism.
Why is it worse?
They're trying to get people who support BDS imprisoned for 20 years and paying criminal fines up to $1 million. Even during McCarthy's era, they did not have such ridiculous prison terms. So Israel is pushing a McCarthyist agenda. However, it's alienating the liberal mainstream. Now you have the American Civil Liberties Union, the Center for Constitutional Rights, many liberal groups around the United States defending our right to BDS. While Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates regimes have been intensifying their normalization relations with Israel, especially the United Arab Emirates, which is buying billions of dollars worth of security equipment from Israeli companies through US subsidiaries, and the Saudi regime intensifying its normalization. Normalization is also a threat to us, to the Palestinian cause, from Qatar, from Jordan, Egypt, among others. But there's a culprit that's not often mentioned, which is the Palestinian officialdom. It has opened the doors for many Arab regimes to normalize relations with Israel by not objecting to that, by sometimes encouraging that. So we don't just blame Arab regimes, we also blame the Palestinian regime. The Palestinian Authority was established in the Oslo agreements as a subcontractor for the occupation. I mean, that's a fact. It's not a matter of opinion.
Do you think they support stability over the freedom of Palestinian people?
The states are certainly normalizing with Israel. They would like nothing more than to see us disappear off the face of the earth and to have a normal relationship with Israel, the United States, and so on.
Is that an emotional statement, or do you think that's true?
Well, recent developments show that it's not so emotional after all. With what's going on in Al-Aqsa, Palestinian nonviolent protesters being shot down by Israel, being shot and injured and so on, we haven't seen any serious reaction from most Arab governments, especially in the Gulf. With the exception of Kuwait, we have not seen anything. A few years ago, you would have heard at least lip service, something, condemnation or something. Now they're calling on both sides to exercise restraint. What, they're acting like Condoleezza Rice now?
Doesn't that create a false equivalency?
Yeah, it's like telling the rapist and the rape victim, exercise restraint. It's not just immoral, it's beyond immoral.
How do you feel?
I feel a lot of pain, but I'm also optimistic, which is strange. I mean, not many Palestinians I know are optimistic. I remain optimistic because I'm in the midst of a struggle and I can see the results. If you see the way Israel arrests young Palestinian children in Jerusalem, for example, and the way they treat them, the torture and so on, it's all meant to destroy them psychologically, not just to colonize their minds, that it's hopeless, to make them lesser humans, that you're subhuman, you're relative humans, you're only human in the relative sense. Therefore, you don't deserve full rights, because you're not a full human after all. Since the Nakba, Israel has not just been colonizing our lands, they've been colonizing our minds with hopelessness, telling us that it's impossible to resist. We're so powerful, you just have to give up and live as slaves. Just live with it. So working on hope, working on triggering hope, achieving results that give our people hope is not just something symbolic or emotional or psychological, it's part of our resistance.